What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of this week's episode. And yet again, I scrapped the episode that I planned to record this week for something totally different that I'm recording on the fly. That seems to be a pattern, and I'm going with it. So hopefully this is a helpful episode to listen to. There's something that's been on my mind for quite a while. I've mentioned it here and there in a few different episodes, and that's just my awareness of how out of touch I am with the typical therapist experience, and particularly how out of touch I am now with the experience of being early in your career, the graduate school experience. I mean, as much as I still feel like I'm in my 20s on the inside, sometimes I so am not anymore. I started graduate school in 2008, and this fall I will have been licensed for 10 years. So a lot has changed since then, and especially as I see some of the comments from you all in my videos, I realize just how much my experience of becoming a therapist and those early years are just so different than what the reality is now. That is to be expected. Things change over time, people evolve, and hopefully some of these changes are rooting for positive change in our profession. Things that people just sort of accepted and tolerated when I was a graduate student are now considered unacceptable. And I think that's the right direction for things to move, but it's also foreign to me. And above and beyond that, particularly, I'm just so aware that the way I've set up my career and my lifestyle is just not representative of the typical therapist experience. It feels so important to acknowledge that. I always have that in my mind whenever I sit down to hit record or script a video, that I'm coming from a very different position than the average person listening or watching. All that to say, knowing how out of touch I likely am with the lived experience of most therapists and most early career therapists, I so desire to find whatever avenues are available for me to connect to what that experience is. And perhaps it's just as a visitor, as a tourist, if you will, but I find myself seeking out those contexts wherever reasonably possible. And one way I've been leading into that is through lurking in the corners of Reddit. I know, I say lurking because I have genuinely in my entire life never posted a single time on Reddit, but now I'm finding myself reading other people's posts quite a bit. There's something about looking on Reddit that feels so much more informative than whatever else is out there, because a lot of the content that's out there is by other people like me, or if they're not like me, they're also just in some other version of not being totally in touch with what's happening with the average therapist. Because the average therapist is working, 30 plus hours a week trying to earn their paycheck, probably not producing YouTube videos and podcasts and writing blog posts and making TikToks. So I think some of the comments that y'all leave below my videos is one very helpful tool for me to stay connected with what's happening. And I really appreciate tools like Reddit to help me feel more connected with a more typical experience of folks. That was a huge amount of introducing the topic of this week's video, because there's a phenomenon I've been noticing in the comments of my videos that I am just so curious about. And that's noticing how many of you are just not feeling the therapy profession. And obviously I have a few videos about this, about, what if you don't want to be a therapist anymore, or alternative income streams, or alternative career paths for folks with therapist training who don't want to do face-to-face therapy anymore. So I'm obviously very connected to this idea of living out an alternative career than just seeing therapy clients all the time. I mean, I personally only see therapy clients one day a week now, and, do stuff like this with the rest of my work week. So I get it. But I've really noticed more recently, I'd say kind of since the pandemic, an increase in comments on my videos from people saying they left the therapy profession, or they're seriously considering leaving the profession, or even if they're still in the profession, just feeling like this absolutely was not worth it. If I could go back, I would choose a different career path, which says a lot. That's not something that when I started, I heard a lot of or related with. And as I look around for podcast episodes or YouTube videos or whatever about this similar topic, there's just not that many people talking about it. A lot of people are in my niche saying, let me sell you a course or some sort of coaching or knowledge about how to be successful as a therapist. And I think that information is incredibly useful. But then on the flip side, it could be seen as bad publicity for someone in my shoes to then emphasize the negative sides of being a therapist. But personally, I'm just most interested in figuring out what's it really like to be a therapist, not just for me, but for therapists in general. Because yes, I do absolutely love my profession. I love seeing therapy clients, and I love the kind of alternative setup that I have, if you will, of seeing therapy clients super part-time while having this online business. But there's so many therapists who have different experiences, and I want to understand those. So all of that said, today I thought I would dive into this particular thread on Reddit that's titled "Hardest Thing About Being a Therapist," and just run through the responses. This was a very, very active thread. It has 237 comments because I want to see what people say is the hardest thing about being a therapist. And of course, I'll offer my thoughts and responses as we go through them. Now, for the podcast version of my episodes, I do release a video version, not just to YouTube, but actually if you're following me on Spotify, you can watch the video now as well. If you're just listening to the MP3, welcome. But you'll notice in the video version, I'm going to put up screenshots of the various comments that I'm going to take a look at. And I'm going to make a choice to blur out the usernames of the commenters, even though all of this information is public. I'll link to this Reddit thread in the description. However, if someone decides to remove their comment, or if they just didn't know that, Marie was going to blast their comment in her episode, I want to respect people's privacy in that sense. That's why I'm blurring out the usernames of the different Reddit posters. So with all of that prefacing out of the way, let's take a look at the most upvoted comments folks left in this question: what's the hardest thing about being a therapist? And this poster was simple and straight to the point. The title of their post is "Hardest Thing About Being a Therapist?" ? And then they write within their post, "What's the hardest thing?" That's it. People can just comment. Love it. Now, the most upvoted comment with 610 upvotes says, "Living your own life well." What a short and concise comment, and how amazing that it receives so many upvotes. This idea that living your life well for so many people is seen as the hardest part about being a therapist. Now, there aren't any replies to this particular comment, but I can definitely imagine all the ways how living your life well might be really difficult as a therapist for so many reasons. I mean, we've talked many times in this channel about how common burnout is amongst therapists, and also how underpaid we are. I mean, obviously, the work that we're doing is quite emotionally taxing. And of course, depending on what kind of space you work in as a therapist, some contexts are even more emotionally taxing than others. So that can make it difficult to live your life well, to feel like, and then I go home and I can just return into whatever I have going on in my personal life, because maybe whatever traumatic thing was going on with your client today is sticking with you, and maybe you're having nightmares about it, or maybe you're really good at helping folks navigate the hardships in their life, but you're dealing with hardships yourself that don't feel possible to navigate. There's so many ways that this could play out and make it difficult to live your life well. And of course, as I read this, I can't help but put on my problem-solving hat and think, how do we make it more possible for more therapists to feel like it is accessible to live our lives well as a therapist while helping other people with their mental well-being? I wish I had all the answers to that, but I can't help but wonder, is it possible that if we had a greater sense of agency and ability to kind of decide our career path while being compensated adequately, could it be possible to feel like we could better access living our life well? I don't know. There's probably so much nuance to problem solving that concern, but it's clearly a problem because 610 people upvoted it. Okay, the next comment showing up has 438 upvotes and a ton of comment replies with folks saying, "Oh my goodness, yes, this is me." Here's the comment in response to the question, "What's the hardest thing about being a therapist?" "Not following my own advice and watching my life fall apart and knowing how to fix it, and knowing the I'm doing is avoidant." I'd prefer ignorance, LOL. I'm choosing to censor the word so that this stays family friendly. But wow, what a heavy comment. I almost want to like break down this comment because there's so many elements to it. At first they're saying not following my own advice, which I interpret to mean like, here I am advising clients in these different ways about how to live their lives well. And meanwhile, I'm not taking that advice. And then they go on to say, watching my life fall apart, knowing how to fix it, and knowing that I'm being avoidant. So they're kind of painting this picture of, as a therapist, we have both so much wisdom as far as how much advice to offer other people to help them, improve their lives in various ways. And we also have so much self-awareness. I mean, can I get an amen on that one? I so relate. We can watch ourselves fall into whatever pit we might be spiraling into because we know all the warning signs. We can see it happening in ourselves and we're stumbling into it, and we can see it happening like it's playing out in a TV show or something like that. But meanwhile, we're still humans. And we find ourselves not doing the things we know we're supposed to be doing to help keep ourselves from spiraling into the pit, whatever version of the pit we might be falling into. And then their follow-up sentence is, I'd prefer ignorance, LOL. I mean, I think of that phrase, ignorance is bliss. And I think there's so much truth in that. I'm not saying I prefer ignorance, but I do think somebody who's living in ignorance is probably accessing a lot more sense of daily happiness because they're probably caught in their own dysfunction to an extent that they're not aware how dysfunctional they are. And don't we all have like loved ones and family members in that boat where we can just see how dysfunctional they are, that they don't even know it, and they seem pretty happy? Even if they're destroying the lives of the people around them, they individually on the inside are probably feeling pretty good about their lives. And we individually on the inside might be just so aware of all of our pitfalls, all of our growth edges. And if we're not in a healthy place, we can really just go to a dark place as a result of knowing all of that. Now, not only was this comment really weighty and insightful, but it received a whole bunch of replies. So let's read some of the responses people had to this comment. The most upvoted response with 132 upvotes says, quote, executive dysfunction, is that you? I relate to this on a spiritual level. If only I did a fraction of what I instill in therapy, I'd be golden. Somebody else says, quote, oh my gosh, I see you. You just read my soul. Was just talking to my own therapist about this today. It is agonizing. And the next quote says, I guide others to a treasure I cannot possess. One day I'll see my struggles as valid and stop feeling bad when I have trouble. Not today, but one day. And someone responds to them and says, our struggles are so valid, which yes, they are. But that sensation of not being able to see our struggles as valid and still offering other people a sense of validation when we can't even access it ourselves. I mean, that's almost like its own kind of torture. And someone else says, quote, you just made me feel so much better just in hearing that I'm not the only bad therapist. Oh, this isn't the end of their comment, but I'm going to interrupt it and just say, you are not a bad therapist. I don't believe in bad therapists. I believe in bad therapy or bad choices within the therapy, but a bad therapist is a heavy identifier, and that's like saying you are a bad person. So I hope you don't mind my reframe. Even though I don't know you, I know you're not a bad therapist because there is no such thing as a bad therapist, just bad therapy or bad moments in therapy. And somebody else says, quote, being ignorant of your misery is one thing, but being completely aware and doing nothing about it, even though you know exactly what to do, is a whole other thing. This feels really heavy. So let me pause and just say, if this is you, where you're feeling like, I'm offering such good support for these clients, but I'm not able to access any of that yourself, like, just for what it's worth, let me just say you deserve to access it yourself. Your struggles are valid. Just because you're a therapist, it doesn't mean that we live on some like parallel plane where we are, able to be immune to like whatever mental health struggles might be going on for us. And if anything, we're more prone to that. There's all kinds of research supporting like we as therapists are more prone to mental health struggles than the average person in the population compared to other career paths. So for what it's worth, just naming that, and I want you to know you are valid. All of us are valid. Your struggles are valid. I wish there was more I could say to address that, but I needed to say that. Okay, so moving on to the next comment in response to the question, what's the hardest thing about being a therapist? With 458 upvotes, this person says, quote, giving every client 100% of your energy every day. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to piece together my own reaction even as I read this, because I'm noticing I'm kind of having like two sort of split reactions, and I'm not even sure which one is like most correct, quote unquote, or healthy. On the one hand, I read this comment, giving every client 100% of your energy every day, and I go, yes, oh my goodness, that's what we do, and it's so tiring. And then I also have this, like, I don't know, is it the devil on my shoulder or the angel? I'm not sure, but this other side of me that goes, I do not give my clients 100% of me every day, which as I say that out loud, I react to that thinking, Marie, you're supposed to give your clients 100% of you. And then this other part of me that goes, you cannot give your clients 100% of you and stay healthy. So just kind of reflecting out loud with you as I'm reacting to this, I'm thinking, yeah, if I'm honest, I do not give my clients 100% of me every day. I don't even give my kids 100% of me every day. I don't even give myself 100% of me every day because there's only so much of me to give. So, everything in my life and every person that's important to me, including my clients, only get a fraction of me because I'm a human being and I don't have 100% to give to every single person. That's not how math works. So I think it's honest and fair to say I don't give 100% to my clients. However, I do the best I can to be as fully present to my clients as I possibly can. And there's going to be, of course, some days that I do that better than others, no doubt. But that is the priority, to say in this moment, no matter what else I have going on in my life, I am going to be here with you, listening to you, thinking about what's going on with you, and doing the best I can to offer you support, whatever that looks like for this individual that I'm working with. And I'll come back to the crap in my life after our session's over. But even if I'm fully present, I can't say I'm giving 100% of myself. And I don't know. I'm wondering what your reactions are to that. Do you feel like you give 100% of yourself? Actually, I'm rereading the comment. They're saying 100% of your energy every day, which maybe doesn't mean the same thing as 100% of yourself. But yeah, I really don't give my clients 100% of my energy. Now, to be fair, I only see clients 1 day a week. So back to me being out of touch with, the most therapists experience. But let's say even on that one day, I'll typically see 6 clients in a day, which I feel like most therapists would say is a pretty full work day. And at the end of that time, I don't at all feel like I gave 100% of my energy to my clients. If anything, at the end of that time, I hop in my car and I go pick up my kids. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is when I'm putting my game face on because I'm going to pick up 2 whining, sometimes screaming children. And usually that's the time of the day when I feel like I need to rehearse in my mind every single mantra I can access in order to stay patient, hopefully, and give 100% of my energy to. So I'm just really curious how you respond to this comment. Feel free to offer your input. I imagine each of us is going to have a really different reaction. And I also imagine that what I just said is probably going to pull a reaction, at least from some of you, thinking yeah, you're supposed to give your clients 100% of your energy every day. But can we? I don't know. Or if we can, is that good? Is that good for our clients even? The next comment in response to this question of what's the hardest thing about being a therapist, with 454 upvotes, someone says being on all day. Someone may see my schedule and, quote, only see 5 to 6 sessions for the day and think that's not a full day of work. But those 5 to 6 sessions are me being 100% on and doesn't count any additional notes, admin, stuff to do. When I used to work a more typical office job, I was in the office for 8 to 9 hours, but I was probably really on for half of that at most. Isn't that so true? So much more downtime, scrolling emails, etc. I greatly prefer actually being engaged in my work, but it can be hard, and by the end of the day, I'm usually quite drained. Yeah, 5 to 6 sessions a day is a very, very full day, which generally does end up being an 8-hour workday because you do have notes and admin. And depending on what kind of space you work in, if you're in private practice, you have to do marketing. If you're working for community mental health, you have trainings. That's an 8-hour workday. But yes, hour for hour, the work we do as therapists is way more energy than a lot of other jobs. I don't want to say every other job, but a lot of other jobs. And somebody left a reply to this comment and they say, I do 3 to 4 sessions a day for this reason. Absolutely. If I was seeing clients more than 1 day a week, my personal cap would probably be 4, maybe 5 sessions in a day, and probably 4 days a week tops. Everyone's different. I've seen folks leave comments in my videos saying, hey, I see 30 clients a week and I feel great. And hey, more power to you. But that's not going to be everyone's story. And so it's really important to understand how much energy it does take you per session and, build your schedule accordingly if you're able to access that kind of control. Okay, pivoting to a very different kind of response, the next most upvoted response to the question of what's the hardest part about being a therapist with 181 upvotes is, quote, not being able to articulate how powerful this work can be. Yes, it's hard not being able to share specific struggles with our loved ones, but even more so, my loved ones can't even grasp the depth of what I witness in so many people's lives. It's like a spiritual experience only we understand. Yes, I so relate with that comment. And the responses to this comment are very resonating. Somebody says, deeply spiritual. Yes, you put this so well. And I love this response from someone that says, quote, as a counselor in training, this gives me hope for this career path in a sea of negativism. Thank you. I think that's so true. We're in this much needed phase of correcting just endless amounts of overworking therapists underpaying us, where folks are seeing it, calling it out as we should. And because we're in this season of naming all these negative aspects about our profession, I think it's also really possible to lose sight of how wonderful this work can be. And the commenter who said that it feels like a deeply spiritual experience that you can't articulate to anyone else really, at least for me personally, I very much resonate with that. It feels like this sacred privilege to be let into the secrets of people's lives that they may not have told anybody else or not be open to even disclosing to, their partner. It's incredibly sacred is the best word that I can think of. And I value that so much. And because of confidentiality, no one's really going to see that except for you and your client. You kind of share that together. And you can kind of share this sort of kindred understanding of that with other therapists. I think there's other professions that share similarities like that, especially folks working in the service industry, in the front lines, first responders, where only you and the other folks in your profession really get how special the work is that you do, and you're never going to be able to quite explain it to somebody who hasn't been in that profession as well. Whew. The next most upvoted one is painful. It says, quote, not always being able to help. I mean, what else do you say about that? It is so true. You can't always help. Okay, the next one's a bit long, but I think it's worth reading. With 127 upvotes, they say, quote, for me, it's working with clients who can do very little about their extremely hard circumstances and who have no good solutions. For example, a client who is deeply unhappy in her cold marriage, but who does not want to leave because it would mean 50% time less with her children. To make matters worse, she does not trust her husband at all to treat them well on his own because there have been safety concerns in the past. Meanwhile, her husband couldn't care less and doesn't want couples therapy. His life and children are well taken care of by his unhappy wife. Although still important work, it can often feel like every session is Groundhog Day, and it pushes the one button I dislike, which is the button that reads, am I doing anything at all? Are they getting anything out of this? I think all of us have had a client situation like that, at least at some point, if not at all points on our caseload, folks who are really stuck in their circumstances, that they are experiencing the short end of the stick when it comes to oppression, marginalization. And I think it would be so inaccurate for us to think that as therapists, through talk therapy on a one-on-one level, that we could help somebody step out of an entire oppressive or marginalized system that has been reinforced on a systemic level. There's only so much we can do to empower someone in that situation, and they may still be stuck very much in their oppressive environment, even with the best of therapy. And that is incredibly painful. I have so many stories like this where those are the things that I have nightmares at night about, of it doesn't matter what I do. This person is stuck, not by their own volition or anything in their control. Society has made them stuck where they are, and that's incredibly difficult. Okay, I'm going to do one more for today's episode, and this one's heavy. With 118 upvotes, they say, quote, "When you're going through your own stuff, but can't take off or leave of absence, and you have to be there for others and shut off the pain you're feeling, it's beyond exhausting." Absolutely. I mean, it's so easy for someone in my position to say, like, no, take that leave of absence. It's not so simple always, because maybe your income depends on it. Maybe, living off of disability is not enough to cover your bills, or maybe you're afraid you're going to lose your job if you lean into disability. Sometimes even just acknowledging that your disability paycheck comes in, with a delay, like, you may not be able to pay your bills during that delay. And I'm just focusing on, disability paychecks. Maybe you're in a situation where you don't even have access to a disability paycheck if you're taking a leave of absence, or maybe it doesn't quite qualify as a disability leave of absence. And so you're just taking time off and can't get paid for it. So to sum up, this is a really challenging position to be in when it happens. And if any of you listening are in this position where you are at the end of the line, but you just cannot take time off, I encourage you to find, wherever you can, find support. If there's no support in your work environment or in your personal life environment, let me leave a link to some hotlines below. At the very least, you can call somebody or text somebody for support, because I do not want you to feel like you are alone. And I'll read one response that somebody left to this comment. They said, quote, "This times 100. I've been grieving, and at the start, it was so wild to shut it off, lock it up, and do the work. And then I started to notice how dangerous it could also be for my own mental health. It's been a balance." Yeah, it's so true. If we compartmentalize everything all the time, it will take its toll. So if there's any way out of that way of being, 100%, I support you finding that path, wherever it is, whatever it looks like. Whew. Well, that was some heavy stuff. I mean, I was asking the question of how do I get more in touch with what it's like to be a therapist for the average therapist, and wow. Thank you so much to all of you. If any of you are watching, thank you for posting to Reddit. And I think it's so important that we talk about these things. There's only so many spaces, or almost no spaces, where it's safe enough to talk about this, because we never know when our clients might be listening. So if we're feeling burnt out and we're saying to the public, "I'm so burnt out," hello, I just hit my tree. What if our client's listening? What if they take that on for us? And so, or if our employer hears it. Anyway, I appreciate Reddit because it creates a platform for people to be able to speak about this. And I hope it's okay that I referenced and quoted these comments from Reddit to share with you all. Hopefully, as you're listening, if you're in the similar boat as anyone who shared, you feel validated. It does feel really heavy, and maybe another time I will follow up with a different video talking about what the best parts of being a therapist are. If you made it to this point in the episode and you feel like it, I would love it if you left a comment just naming the hardest part of being a therapist for you, and also the best part of being a therapist. I think that would be really interesting to see what both of those responses are. Well, wherever you're at in your career, I hope you found this episode supportive and enlightening. And I want to keep talking about this stuff. So, if there's similar topics that you're interested in, feel free to let me know in the comments. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.